Hey everyone, welcome to the Child Anxiety FAQ podcast. FAQ stands for Frequently Asked Questions, and I'm answering your questions about child and teen anxiety. My name is Dawn Friedman, and I have been working with kids and families for more than 30 years as a preschool teacher, parent educator, family case manager, clinical counselor, and now as the owner and operator of Child Anxiety Support, where I support parents of anxious kids. And this week's question is, do already anxious children struggle more with anxiety as they enter adolescence? And a secondary question, do hormone changes affect anxiety? This was such an interesting question that I skipped all the other questions I had lined up because I was excited to answer this one. Let's answer the first part first. Do already anxious children struggle more with anxiety as they begin to enter adolescence? Yes. Yes, indeed, they do. They certainly do. And there is a lot of research that says that. In fact, I really encourage parents of younger children, if there's even a little bit of anxiety going on, take care of it while they're younger because we can expect it to amp up as they head towards middle school. I'd say the tween years, really, I start seeing anxiety increase in kids around 9, 10 ish. And the sooner we get a handle on it, the easier it's going to be to deal with the inevitable rise of greater anxiety in those tweenish years. That's the first part of it, and we'll get into that more. But the second one is, do hormone changes affect anxiety? And that's the part I was really interested in finding out. So I headed to the research literature, and the answer is we don't know. We don't really know how hormonal changes impact anxiety, in part because we are still studying hormonal changes. One thing I was able to learn is it looks like hormonal changes do increase sensitivity to the physical feelings of anxiety. And I couldn't find any information about why that might be. So I'll tell you my theory. Hormonal changes cause a whole lot of body changes. And I don't know if you remember being in middle school or you remember going through puberty, but all of a sudden you become a bit unmoored. Your body doesn't make sense to you. Kids get clumsier at that age because they're growing quickly and they're kind of growing weirdly. Like all of a sudden you'll have longer legs and pointier elbows, or you'll be a little chubbier and take up space in a way that doesn't make sense. And so you become more awkward. That awkwardness is a physical experience, but it's also an emotional and a mental one because that body we've sort of relied on, we sort of understand, stops making sense to us. All of a sudden, the chair you're sitting in doesn't fit you in the same way. Your favorite t-shirt or jeans don't look like you expected them to. That awkwardness means you're clumsier, which can make you feel more insecure. And you're just sort of hypersensitive, right? You're a little bit more aware of how awkward and uncomfortable you feel in space. Also, puberty can cause other things like headaches and stomach aches and leg pains, growing pains. And that can also contribute to a sensitivity to those anxious feelings like your heart racing, your stomach feeling nauseous, shakiness. Doesn't that all make sense? And that's really what it comes down to is we look at the research and it's not surprising because we have our own experience of going through adolescence and tween years and it just makes sense. We remember feeling awkward and confused and a little more anxious, and the research bears that out, which is all to say, back again, we're not sure how hormones affect it, but we do know that hormones are going a little wacky during adolescence and that anxiety increases. And it makes sense that there would be some correlation there. I did find one study that said that those feelings, those physical, symptomatic, somatic experiences are more present for boys than for girls. My experience has been both boys and girls report somatic symptoms of anxiety, even very young into adolescence. That's been my experience. I'd be interested in hearing your experience. But now let's talk a little bit more about why already anxious children struggle more with anxiety. If it's not just hormones, well, what is it? Well, that's where we look at child development. So here's the thing: when we're working with anxious children, the picture that we're getting is of who they are, what their personality is, their temperament, who they are, how they exist in the world, their personality, who they've been since they were a tiny little baby. We're also looking at who they are in the moment. That is to say, what is their development expecting of them, demanding of them? What is going on for them in that period of growth, and how does anxiety show up there? And then the third place is their environment. That's you, that's the parent, that's their school, that's the way the world is impacting them. And the way the world is impacting them is often the easiest thing to change. That's why I work with parents. But how I work with parents is going to depend on who their child is and who their child is at that very moment. And that's when I turn to my handy dandy child development. This is my cheat sheet. And I often flip to this. Now, I've got books and books on my bookshelf about child development, but I also have this cheat sheet I refer to often because it's just kind of a quick hit of what's going on for kids that age. It's something I put together just so it's easy to pull things up for parents. Let's look at what's happening for kids 12 to 15. Now, here's the thing about child development, it's very specific when they're little, like babies, right? Like babies have to learn to walk before they can run. We know that. We know that trajectory. We kind of have a rough idea of what kids should be doing as they're younger. As they get older and head to adulthood, that child development gets more and more individualized. So even though we know babies generally look the same as far as developmental trajectory, 8-year-olds start looking a little different. 12-year-olds look very different. By the time we're in our 30s, our development is incredibly individualized. We can still say some general things, what it is to get older as a human, but how we live that out gets more and more specific to our own experience, our own personality, in our own environment. That's one reason why you find a ton of books about babies and not so many books about teens, because your teen is not going to look like every other teen in the way that your baby might have resembled other babies. But for 12 and 15-year-olds, what is going on? Big thing about this age is they're trying to figure out who the heck they are, something that we continue to do throughout our lives, but very much in adolescence. The example I always give is working with a young teen who every time I saw them in session, they would say, the kind of person who is, and then they'd contradict themselves. They might start the session saying, I'm the kind of person who likes to spend time alone. I don't need a lot of friends. And 20 minutes later, I'm the kind of person who's the life of the party. I really like to be social. And those things are true. They're figuring out who they are. They're trying on different personalities. They're trying on different relationships. And that can cause a lot of anxiety. If you don't know who you are when you wake up in the morning, if you don't know what to expect of yourself, if you're wrestling with your values, an existential crisis of who am I? What is my purpose? How do I behave in the world? Well, that's anxiety provoking. That's the task of teens and young adults. And as they struggle with those, making decisions, making bad decisions, making decisions that do not jive with their values and with who they want to be and who they really are, that's anxiety provoking. So, what's the other thing that's happening at this age? They're often withdrawing from their parents. You might be seeing it in your adolescent. You might see conflict increase. That whole generation gap thing, it's really about kids trying to figure out how to be independent. How do I break away from these people I love and who love me? How do I make it on my own without disappointing them? How do I grow and make my own decisions while feeling like perhaps I am disloyal? How do I disappoint my family by having a different opinion? For some kids, the high perfectionist, high anxiety kids who want to be good, this can be even more of a struggle. Growing away from us is not always the obvious kind of 1950s James Dean rebel without a cause. Sometimes it's just being a grouch. Sometimes it's just being mouthy. Sometimes it's just rolling their eyes a lot. But that's painful. And lots of teens that I've worked with really need to process that with me and hear from me that this does not make them a bad person to be knocking heads with their parents. It is a developmental stage to be expected. And often I'm needing to tell parents that too, to let their kids go, to give them permission to be different. The other thing is that in social development, they are starting to turn more towards each other. They're more peer oriented. And that brings a host of anxieties. Who do you want to align with? Do you want to sit with the mean girls? Do you want to sit with the nice kids? Do you want to be a jock? Do you want to be a drama kid? Do you want to be in the band? What about volleyball? All of that, all those expectations, all those values. Who am I? Who do I fit in with? Who do I want to be? And then the expectations of the group. One of the things I tell kids is we talk a lot about peer pressure, and peer pressure isn't that bad kid at the party going, hey, do the drugs. Everybody cool is doing it. No, no, no. It's much more subtle than that. It's just your friends saying, we don't wear those kinds of shirts. Let's wear that kind of shirt. And so you're trying to wear that kind of shirt. It's not really a shirt you like. It's your friends saying, oh, go ahead and lie to your parents so you can stay out later, and going, I really want to stay out later. And there's that one person I like, and they're going to be at that event, but I also don't want to lie to my parents. Peer pressure is more complicated, it's more subtle, and that's anxiety provoking. And then lots of our kids don't know how to fit in. They don't know how to make small talk, especially those socially anxious kids. Maybe they don't like small talk. They want to fit in, but they want to be themselves. They want to know how to respond when somebody asks them something, but they're not sure how to do it. Do I make a joke? Nobody gets my jokes. I don't understand the joking. And the thing too about teens is their whole life tends to be in this one space of school where you're not really allowed to outgrow yourself. You're not allowed to get away from the story of who you are. This is one reason why I think it can be really helpful to give kids other social outlets if they need them. For example, if your child is struggling to fit in at school, can you give them an extracurricular that is not attached to school where they can explore that experience of themselves? So if you've got a kid who's kind of a jock and they've been aligned with all those jock kids at school, and then there's this secret nerd in them, their secret anime fan, can you get them to a convention so they can also explore that nerdier part of themselves? As they're figuring out who they are, they need opportunities to try on different parts. You might see that their anxiety expresses itself differently in different environments and requires different practice and exploration and support. This is all to say that yes, kids do struggle more with anxiety as they head into puberty. It has to do with body changes more than hormones. It has to do with shifts in relationships with you and with other people. And I didn't even get into the added demands academically, because all of a sudden, everything is on your permanent record. Everybody's telling you this math test you're taking on Friday, it's going to decide your future into college, whether or not you get into the right school and have the right life and get the right job. So let's pull back on some of that. Let's examine where our anxiety is coming in about our kids' futures. Let's remember that growing is in itself the point of growing. It's not just to get to some finish line of being 35 and having the right house and the right partner and the right kids and the right job. It's also just right here in this moment, learning how to be a human. That's the point of this moment, is experiencing it and understanding who you are as you grow to who you want to be. Big existential stuff. That is the work of anxiety. Okay. If you have a question for the Child Anxiety Fact podcast, you can go to my website, childanxietysupport.com, and post it there. Who knows? I may answer it on the show. All right. Talk to you next week.